Judge Judy walked onto CNN expecting to crush a rookie congresswoman on live TV and publicly humiliate her. But in under 3 minutes, Jasmine Crockett baited her into a fatal answer, slammed down cold receipts, turned the studio into a courtroom, and left the legendary judge sitting in dead silence as millions watched her power collapse in real time. The CNN studio was already hot before anyone said a single word. This wasn't a regular talk show segment. It was a CNN special town hall on criminal justice reform, broadcast live from their New York studio, designed to bring together opposing voices and force a real public conversation about the future of American justice. This wasn't just a discussion between two guests. It was a collision between two eras, two belief systems, and two definitions of power. Anderson Cooper sat in the center like a referee who already knew the fight wouldn't stay friendly. On one side sat Judge Judy Sheindlin, a symbol of old-school authority and courtroom dominance. On the other side sat Congresswoman Jasmine Crockett, a rising figure who built her career challenging the system from the inside. The room didn't really heat up until Jasmine Crockett decided to stop dancing around theory and drag the conversation straight into real-world consequences. She leaned forward, elbows close to the table, eyes locked on the camera, and spoke like she was addressing a jury instead of a TV audience. "Mandatory minimums don't protect communities," she said sharply. "They protect bad policies. They trap judges, destroy families, and pretend one-size-fits-all punishment is justice." Then she dropped the example that made the air change. "I've seen a black teenager with a few grams of marijuana get years behind bars, while a white college kid with cocaine walks out with community service and a warning. That's not rare, that's routine." Her voice didn't rise, but every word landed heavier than the last. "So if we're going to talk about law and order," she added coldly, "let's stop pretending the playing field is level, because it's not, and everyone in the courtroom knows it." Judge Judy snapped back immediately with that familiar authority tone, the one built to shut people up. "Justice is blind," she fired. "It doesn't care about race. It cares about behavior." Crockett didn't flinch. She tilted her head slightly and answered without missing a beat. "If justice were blind, Judge Sheindlin, we wouldn't see the same communities getting crushed over and over while others get a slap on the wrist," she said. When Judy threw out, "Stop making excuses for criminals," Jasmine's expression hardened. "Calling facts excuses is exactly how injustice survives," she shot back. "You don't get to erase data, patterns, and lived experience just because they make you uncomfortable." A few people in the audience shifted in their seats. You could feel the tension spreading outward like a ripple. Anderson Cooper tried to jump in, sensing the argument was about to explode. "Let's focus on solutions," he said, attempting to steer the conversation away from the fire. Jasmine didn't let him. She raised her hand slightly, not to interrupt, but to claim the floor. "No," she said firmly. "You don't fix a broken system by skipping over the damage it's already done." Then she went harder. "We keep talking about personal responsibility while ignoring institutional responsibility. We punish the poorest defendants with the harshest sentences, then act shocked when communities don't trust the system." She looked straight at Judge Judy again. "You call this accountability. I call it selective enforcement wrapped in tradition." The studio went quiet. Cameras zoomed in. The polite debate tone was officially gone. Then Jasmine Crockett reached for the small stack of notes in front of her, glanced down for half a second, then looked back up with the calm confidence of someone who knew the data would do the damage for her. "Black defendants receive sentences that are, on average, nearly 20% longer than white defendants for the same crimes," she said slowly, making sure every word landed. "That's not my opinion. That's federal data." She paused just long enough for the statement to sink in, then added, "So when we say the system is fair, we're not talking about reality. We're talking about what we want to believe." Judge Judy scoffed, barely hiding her irritation. She waved her hand dismissively. "Statistics can be manipulated," she snapped. "You can make numbers say anything you want. What matters is what actually happens in courtrooms." Jasmine didn't blink. "What happens in courtrooms is exactly what those numbers represent," she replied. "They're not abstract. They're patterns of real decisions made by real judges, including people who believe they're being fair. That was the moment the room split. You could hear low murmurs ripple through the audience. Some nodded quietly in agreement with Crockett. Others shook their heads, clearly siding with Judy's no-nonsense stance. The energy stopped being neutral and started pulling in opposite directions. Anderson Cooper tried to regain control, but the rhythm was already broken. He opened his mouth to move on, then hesitated as CNN's lower third graphic flashed onto the screen beneath Jasmine's face. A simple data summary appeared. Sentencing gaps, incarceration rates, side-by-side percentages. It wasn't flashy. It was clean, blunt, and hard to ignore. Jasmine gestured lightly toward the screen. "That's not ideology," she said. "That's the outcome of decades of policy." Judge Judy glanced at the numbers for barely a second before leaning back in her chair. "Those numbers don't tell me what I saw for 30 years, she said coldly. The stare between them locked in. Judge Judy could have stayed on policy. She could have kept the argument about sentencing, data, or courtroom philosophy. Instead, she made the move that changed everything. She leaned forward, lifted her hand, and pointed directly at Jasmine Crockett, her voice sharpening with every word. "Your generation is the problem," she said flatly. "You blame the system for everything. You turn personal responsibility into a political excuse." The room stiffened. Crockett didn't move, but you could see the shift in her posture, the quiet alertness of someone who just realized the fight had crossed a line. Judy kept going. "You want to fix crime by talking about feelings and social theories instead of holding people accountable," she added. "That's not justice. That's weakness dressed up as compassion." Then came the line that sucked the air out of the studio. Judge Judy smirked and shook her head slightly. "You've been in Congress, 5 minutes?" she said. "And suddenly you think you understand justice better than someone who actually lived it in real courtrooms for decades?" A few people in the audience gasped softly. The camera operators froze, hands steady on the controls, knowing this was the kind of moment that would be replayed 1,000 times online. Jasmine Crockett's face stayed calm, but her eyes hardened. That sentence didn't just challenge her argument. It attacked her credibility, her experience, and her right to even be in the conversation. Anderson Cooper felt it instantly. He glanced off camera toward the producers, his expression tight, almost pleading, as if asking whether he should step in or let it burn. No one moved. The silence stretched longer than normal TV silence, long enough to feel uncomfortable, long enough for viewers to lean closer to their screens. It was the kind of pause where everyone knows something big is about to happen. Judge Judy leaned back, clearly expecting Jasmine to either snap or defend herself. Jasmine didn't do either. She sat perfectly still, letting the weight of the insult hang in the air. For a few seconds, Jasmine Crockett said nothing. Not a single word. Her hands rested calmly on the table, fingers lightly folded, her back straight, her face completely still. No eye roll, no sigh, no angry reaction. It felt less like silence and more like a verdict being prepared. The audience waited for her to explode, to clap back, to defend herself. She didn't. The longer she stayed quiet, the heavier the room became. Judge Judy shifted slightly in her chair, clearly expecting a response that never came, while the camera zoomed in closer, catching every tiny movement in Jasmine's expression. Then it happened. Jasmine lifted her eyes and gave a small, controlled smile. It wasn't friendly. It wasn't sarcastic either. It was the kind of smile lawyers use right before they dismantle a witness. A few people in the crowd recognized it instantly and leaned forward in their seats. The energy in the studio changed again, sharper this time, more dangerous. Jasmine finally spoke, but she didn't start with a defense. She didn't start with a speech. She started with a question, slow and deliberate. "In all your years on the bench," she said quietly, "did you ever stop to ask why the same communities kept showing up in your courtroom over and over again?" The question hung in the air like a challenge wrapped in politeness. Judge Judy answered without hesitation, almost on instinct. Because there's more crime in those communities, she said firmly, as if the answer was obvious. The moment the words left her mouth, Jasmine's smile tightened just slightly. Not in satisfaction, but in confirmation. Jasmine didn't hesitate this time. She spoke with cold precision. That answer you just gave is exactly the problem, she said. You didn't describe crime. You described surveillance. You described enforcement patterns. You described how power decides who gets watched and who gets ignored. Her tone sharpened. Flood a neighborhood with police, and you don't just find more arrests. You manufacture a crime narrative. Then you use that narrative to justify harsher laws, heavier sentences, and more cages. That's not justice. That's a feedback loop built to punish the same people over and over. She leaned forward slightly, eyes locked on Judge Judy. And when you call that common sense, what you're really doing is protecting a system that hides behind tradition. Then she reached down and pulled up a thin folder, placing it on the table between them like evidence in open court. Let's stop talking in generalities, she said. Here are the receipts. She lifted the first page. Department of Justice summary. Same drug usage rates across racial groups, drastically different arrest outcomes. She flipped to the next sheet. Sentencing ratios. Crack versus powder cocaine. One community punished like predators, the other treated like patients. Another page. 2 defendants, same charge, same record. One got probation. One lost years of their life. Different zip codes, different skin tones, same so-called blind system. The audience started murmuring louder now, the sound spreading through the room like static. Judge Judy tried to jump in, clearly irritated. Now wait, she began, but Jasmine cut her off instantly. She raised her hand, palm steady. I'm not finished, Your Honor, she said, her voice calm but sharp enough to slice the air. You don't get to interrupt facts just because they make you uncomfortable. She tapped the folder once with her finger. You said numbers can be manipulated. Fine. Then explain why the same communities keep paying the highest price every single decade. Explain why punishment follows poverty like a shadow. Explain why your version of tough always lands on the same backs. The studio went dead silent. Even Anderson Cooper stopped moving. Jasmine leaned back slowly, keeping eye contact the entire time. You didn't just answer my question, she said. You exposed your mindset. You proved how easy it is to turn assumptions into law and law into suffering. Her voice dropped lower, colder. This isn't about experience on a bench. It's about whether you're brave enough to admit the bench was built on rules that protect comfort, not fairness. Judge Judy sat frozen, lips pressed together, clearly shaken. Jasmine didn't let the moment cool down. She went straight for the psychological pressure, her voice steady but cutting. You keep talking about what you saw from the bench, she said. Let me tell you what I saw standing in front of it. She lifted her chin slightly. I wasn't sitting above people deciding their fate. I was standing next to them when the system came down on their heads. The room went quiet again. I was a public defender, a civil rights attorney. I didn't watch lives from a comfortable seat. I fought for them when the odds were stacked and the outcome was already written. She paused just long enough to let the contrast sink in. You ruled. I resisted. That's the difference. Then she delivered the story, short and sharp, like a witness statement. 2 young men, same charge, same evidence, same courtroom, Jasmine said. One walked out with probation and went home to dinner. The other was sent away for years. Her voice tightened slightly. The one who went to prison had a mother in the hallway holding her child, trying to explain why dad wasn't coming home. That kid grew up with visiting hours instead of bedtime stories. She looked directly at Judge Judy. Same law, same crime, different outcome. And you want to tell me this system is blind? The audience shifted, some people visibly uncomfortable now, others nodding slowly as the weight of the story settled in. Judge Judy's face flushed red, not with anger this time, but with the look of someone losing control of the room. She opened her mouth, then closed it again, clearly searching for ground that was no longer there. Anderson Cooper didn't step in. He didn't interrupt. He barely moved. Jasmine didn't pause this time. She went straight for the center of Judge Judy's image, her voice calm but cutting like a blade. "You didn't just build a career in courtrooms," she said. "You built a brand. You turned justice into entertainment and called it authority." The words hit the room hard. "You made millions yelling at people who couldn't fight back, people who needed that appearance fee, people who didn't have lawyers, power, or media teams protecting them." A low gasp rippled through the audience. Jasmine didn't let up. "You took real pain, real desperation, real human mistakes, and packaged them into daytime drama. And now you want to stand here and lecture me about accountability?" She shook her head slowly. "That's not leadership. That's profit wrapped in a robe." Before Judge Judy could respond, the producer made a split-second call. The screen behind them lit up. A quick montage rolled. Judge Judy shouting, the studio audience laughing, a defendant staring down at the floor, shoulders slumped, face frozen in humiliation. It lasted barely 10 seconds, but it felt much longer. The contrast was brutal. When the clip cut out, the silence was thick enough to choke on. Jasmine gestured lightly toward the dark screen. "That's what you call justice?" she asked quietly. "That's what you're defending right now?" She leaned forward again. "You say you protected communities. What you really protected was your image. You didn't just judge people, you performed over them." Judge Judy's jaw tightened. Her eyes darted once toward the monitor, then back to Jasmine, but no words came out. Then Jasmine stood up slowly, not aggressively, not rushed, just controlled, deliberate movement that pulled every camera toward her. "Being tough on people who can't fight back isn't strength," she said, her voice low and steady. "It's bullying." She held Judge Judy's gaze without blinking. "And I don't get intimidated by bullies. Not on television, not in courtrooms, not no matter how famous they are." The room went completely silent. No clapping, no murmuring, no reactions at all. Judge Judy sat frozen in her chair, lips parted, eyes wide, with nothing left to say. And in that dead quiet moment, everyone watching knew they had just witnessed a public collapse of power, live, unfiltered, and impossible to take back. The moment the show cut to commercial, the internet detonated. That 10-second clip of Jasmine saying she wasn't intimidated by bullies spread faster than the broadcast itself. Hashtags exploded within minutes. Feeds filled with split-screen edits labeled how it started and how it ended, showing Judge Judy pointing and shouting on one side, then sitting silent on the other. Memes rolled in nonstop. Some slowed the moment down with dramatic music. Others looped Jasmine's calm stare like a mic drop on repeat. By the time the program finished airing, millions of people had already picked a side, and the narrative was locked in. One woman lost control, the other never did. The reactions came in two clear waves. Legal analysts called it a textbook example of courtroom psychology, saying Jasmine cross-examined a public figure on live television and never raised her voice. One former prosecutor said, "That wasn't an argument. That was a controlled takedown built on timing and evidence." Political commentators jumped in next. A few praised her composure under pressure. Others admitted, even while disagreeing with her politics, that she won the moment. One conservative pundit summed it up bluntly. "You don't have to like her views to see that she dominated the exchange." That line got shared almost as much as the clip itself. Judge Judy's team rushed into damage control mode. A short statement was released, carefully worded and sterile, calling her comments experience-based perspectives and insisting she respects all viewpoints. It didn't land. Online, nobody was quoting the statement. They were replaying the footage. They weren't talking about policy. They were talking about tone, control, and the fact that one person screamed while the other stayed ice cold. Every replay made the contrast sharper. Every repost made the silence at the end louder. The more her team tried to soften the moment, the harder it stuck. By the next morning, the story had fully flipped. What started as a town hall debate turned into a case study in power and composure. Jasmine Crockett didn't just win an argument. She showed that in an age addicted to outrage, the quiet voice with receipts hits the hardest. And that was the part people couldn't stop sharing. If you want to see more moments like this, where power gets tested in real time, make sure you stay tuned, because this kind of showdown isn't slowing down anytime soon. If this moment shocked you, inspired you, or made you see power differently, don't just watch and scroll past it. Hit the subscribe button now, turn on notifications, and join this channel so you never miss the next real-time political showdown. New confrontations, bigger revelations, and moments they don't want you to see are coming, and you'll want a front row seat when it happens.